Hello and good morning, evening or afternoon, depending on when you are streaming this video, which is the latest interview in our Susty Talks series. Running since 2020, Susty Talk is designed to keep us all feeling connected to sustainability leaders and keep the conversation going during COVID-19 and beyond. And I'm delighted to have on for our engagement week, Anna Lungley, who is the CSO at Dentsu. Great to catch up with you, Anna.
Sarah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to see you again.
And you. Yes, we were calling last year about the company's internal carbon strategy specifically, but for Engagement Week, I'd love to focus on some of the consumer insights and engagement that you guys are doing. Specifically, I received a report from Dentsu recently called The Age of Inclusive Intelligence, looking at consumer attitudes and behaviours around climate change. So I'd love to hear in your words some of the key findings. Let's just start out with the key findings and go from there.
Yes, well, fantastic, Sarah, and just a little bit of context as well for our viewers today. Dentsu is one of the world's largest media and advertising companies, so we serve 91 of the top 100 advertisers and about 60,000 other organisations, from brands to governments and NGOs, including Greenpeace and WWF. And that's important context because our business is built on data and consumer insights. So everything we do is to raise awareness and ultimately change behaviour. And the consumer vision that you were referencing is one of the surveys that we run, and it's about 30,000 people that we talk to understand their attitudes. And the most recent one we've done, which is looking at the age of inclusive intelligence, is looking at their attitudes to things like climate change and diversity. And I think that's really important. Our physical footprint is not significant, but the brain print of media is. And that's increasingly important when you're talking about things like climate change and diversity. It's understanding how people think and their attitudes today so we can actually try and shift them in the right direction.
Fantastic. And a summary quote from that report that I have in front of me says eco concerns will be central to purchasing decisions by 2030. So around 2/3 of those surveyed said that by that time they'll be in a place to not buy products that have a negative environmental impact. So I wanted to get your view on whether you think that that customer demand is ahead of where most brands are at with their communications and commitments at the moment.
Yes, it's really interesting. It's clear that tomorrow's consumer is going to be motivated by causes and values in a profound way. And of course, we were seeing that change before COVID, but it's accelerated since. And I would suggest that we're seeing growing consumer impatience for action on climate change at a global level. And the stats that you quoted, I think 68% of consumers believe that by 2030, a company's reputation will depend on its action to address climate change. And of course, as you say, that has huge implications for brands. And we saw that reflected in change in diets as well. So really interesting, nearly half of consumers, 45% of consumers predict that by 2030, eating red meat will be considered as environmentally harmful as using fossil fuels. So I think we're really seeing that shift. And as you say, 2/3 of UK consumers say that by 2030, they will not buy products that have a negative environmental impact or are single use. And this is a fundamental shift in human and social behaviour. And as a result, we see brand behaviour changing rapidly. So almost all of our clients are now asking us about sustainability. But I don't think everyone fully appreciates the pace of the change. This decade is going to see entire sectors succeed or fail, depending on how quick they are to move. And of course, we've seen sustainability leaders. So, for example, IKEA, P&G, Unilever, for example, GM, who've been on this journey for a long time, and we're already seeing them make behaviour. But as an industry as a whole, I think there's more to do to upskill marketeers within organisations. So the World Federation of Advertisers published really interesting data last week that suggests that only 10% of marketing departments feel like they're climate competent and able to really engage in that debate. So there's massive appetite there. But we do really need to match those marketing departments onto the sustainability experts within their organisations, increase collaboration to really drive this agenda forward.
Fantastic, a great overview, and I'd love to ask about how that's been shaping your brand engagement communication. So we've heard from sustainability professionals that are in-house that maybe they used to pitch to the board and now the board comes to them and wants it done yesterday. So I wanted to see whether brand engagement has changed. So has the sort of push and pull dynamic changed in recent times?
Yes, I think both the push and the pull. So the pull coming from consumers. So over the last decade, the power balance has completely shifted. So it used to be brands pushing communication out by direct marketing, for example. But today, citizens hold the power. So through the adoption of social media, people are more likely to actually look to their friends or their family, look at reviews. So that kind of, consumer voice, they're no longer, in fact, consumers, I would suggest, is actually an inaccurate term because people don't passively consume anymore. They actively drive behavior. So you see that pull for product, and we shouldn't underestimate the power. And then within brands, of course, we see the business case increasingly start. So there's really interesting data from NYU Stern that shows that 50% of growth in consumer packaged growth between 2013 and 2018, so a 5-year period, came from sustainable products. So that's a massive shift, and that sends a very strong commercial message to the board around the value of sustainability. And Kantar, I think, only in November actually published data that said 175% of brand value growth for brands was perceived to be associated with social impact. So again, you see the brand equity and the business case there. And the final thing is product loyalty. So 91% of millennials will switch to a new product from a purpose-driven category, even in extremely loyal categories like, for example, cosmetics. It's the one thing that will persuade consumers to change. So that's why the boards are really recognising the opportunity. And I think the brands that engage it will absolutely thrive because consumers will no longer tolerate inauthenticity, and they're looking for organisations to be and mean more to them in their lives.
Great. And obviously, as you mentioned, and you've cited a few of them there's been lots of surveys on consumer attitudes to sustainable business. Most people will obviously say that they either shop sustainably or would like to shop more sustainably. But we're also in a recession and in a sort of online shopping world. So people say that, but then you see that Boohoo has a surge in profits, for example. So I wanted to get your views on how, at this moment in time, businesses can help convince shoppers that choosing sustainably can be affordable.
Yes, I think it's both affordable and aspirational. So for far too long, the narrative around sustainable behaviours has been one of compromise. So we've always talked about giving up meat. But over the last couple of years, what we've seen is the power of shifting that to actually talking about plant-based lifestyles from being healthy and being trendy. So I think that shift is really, really changing, and consumers are prepared to pay more, but they often don't know how, which product is more sustainable. So actually what you do need to do is actually show them. So we need improved packaging, improved product placement, and improved education so that people make that decision. We're in a recession, but all the data says that actually if you give consumers that information and you guide them through that purchasing decision, then they are prepared to pay more.
Great. And you mentioned there that obviously there is some confusion about what is sustainable, and obviously different businesses and different thought leaders will actually have different definitions of that word. There's different labelling requirements about terms like recycled. So with all of that going on, and obviously, as you say, lots of brands are changing their advertising, their campaigns, or their packaging. Do you have advice on avoiding greenwashing? I mean, particularly here in the UK, the CMA is doing a review on sectors like you mentioned, beauty products. I think perhaps people are wary about that because obviously it goes directly on your skin.
Yes. So one of the things I would say when it comes is just be as open and transparent as you can. So actually, if organisations talk about the Paris Agreement, they talk about alignment with net zero, but set science-based targets, make sure that you're disclosing via CDP. Do the basics so that actually people can look up and just find out whether or not you are being authentic in your journey. And I think that's really, really important to avoid allegations of greenwashing. And what we actually find is that the more open and transparent you will be, the more the consumers will forgive you if you make mistakes. And it's also an opportunity to build engagement because we want to learn. We do think it's really important though, and everything we've seen is to actually put tools and products into the hands of people so that they can make more informed decisions. So one of the experiments that we ran was with one of our agencies, Isobar. They created something called a fish, it was a fish scanner essentially, and they did it with National Geographic in Taiwan, where we have massive issues around overfishing, but actually giving people an app which when they're in the market and in the supermarket, before they buy the product, they can actually scan it to find whether or not the fish comes from sustainable fish stock. So actually just making it really, really easy for people to make those decisions as well. So we need to equip people to make the right decision, and to avoid greenwashing, just be as open and transparent and set science-based targets and show that you're on that pathway.
Great, thanks Anna. This is such an interesting topic. I could be here far longer, but that's all the time we have for today's recording. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah.